The left will always govern with the most progressive laws that you can possibly imagine. And of course, as a result of these laws, it inevitably blows up in their faces. But when this failure happens, they will always try to blame someone else because it couldn't possibly be their bad policy. And this is exactly what we see called out today by Representative Harriet Hageman, where she completely embarrasses Representative Lieu on the object of these LA wildfires. So before we get to these clips, don't forget to like and comment on this video so break through the algorithms. Here we go.
I've talked to numerous firefighters. I've visited the intensive damage. I've had multiple briefings from firefighters, first responders, and fire chiefs. This is what they told me. The reason these fires in Southern California spread so quickly, caused so much damage, was because of Santa Ana winds that reach unprecedented gusts of 100 miles per hour. Gusts so high that helicopters and the airplanes could not fly. Also because of very low relative humidity and the driest conditions in California history. None of the firefighters said it was about overregulation or homeless people or the Delta spelt fish or the timber harvest or voter ID laws. So shame on anyone who is exploiting the pain and suffering of disaster victims to jam through partisan ideological policies. We should get disaster aid to these disaster victims now without conditions, just like we treat every other disaster victim across America. We just gave aid this past December to South Carolina, Florida, Oklahoma. The Democrats say, hey, we want you to do better on climate change policies in your state. No, we just gave that aid because these are Americans who are suffering. So do not exploit them. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize the gentlewoman from Wyoming, Hageman. Ms. Hageman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Climate change and global warming are the scapegoats for the Democrats and radical environmentalists to deflect attention from their failed policies and the destruction caused by their own actions. In 2001, under Bill Clinton, the Forest Service adopted the roadless rule, which was designed to deny access, management, and use to 58.5 million acres of National Forest Service lands. We warned at the time that this rule would cause catastrophic forest fires, reduce the amount of water available for communities for farming and other uses, and also result in catastrophic pine beetle outbreaks, which is in fact exactly what has occurred. Every single one of the things that we described would happen has in fact happened, and California has suffered maybe more than many of the states. Recently, the gentleman who ran the Forest Service under Joe Biden actually admitted in a hearing that the roadless rule was one of the primary roadblocks to proper and effective forest range management. So to say that the government is always trying to fix its last solution, I don't think you need to look any further than the roadless rule. California has essentially the same water infrastructure in place today with 40 million people that it had in the 1960s with 16 million people. So when we talk about putting conditions on the kind of relief that is going to be necessary to help to rebuild California, it must include additional water infrastructure and fire mitigation methods to avoid having these kinds of catastrophes happen ever again. I have an article that I have just recently pulled up. It stated that Newsom vetoed a bill to enhance fire mitigation so he could grab the land for affordable housing. This was a bill that was introduced in 2020, SB 182. It was authored by then State Senator Hannah Beth Jackson, a Democrat from Santa Barbara, whose district had just suffered the Thomas fire. This bill sought to increase local planning requirements and guidelines for permitting development in certain fire hazard severity zones. But what happened to that bill? It passed through both the Senate and the House. It was actually a very good bill. What happened? Mr. Newsom vetoed it. Why did he veto it? Because it did not comport with his idea of getting rid of single-family homes and pushing people into multifamily homes. And in his veto letter, he actually stated, wildfire resilience must become a more consistent part of land use and development decisions. However, Whenever a politician uses the word however, you know they're going in the opposite direction, don't you? However, it must be done while meeting our housing needs. And for him, he wanted the money and the attention and the policy to focus on multifamily homes, not in protecting and hardening the resources available for the existing homes. So call me a bit skeptical when I hear the folks on the other side jump up and down and scream and yell about the fact that they've been doing everything necessary to try to harden and try to address these catastrophes, when the exact opposite is in fact true.
So Gavin Newsom is a horrible governor. That's a big shocker, okay? So we all know about the failings of the LA wildfires, okay? But Ted Lieu, what's he going to say? He's going to blame the environment. It was really hot. It was really dry. There were high winds, right? All of which can be true, especially as you get towards the drier season, i.e. summer, etc., okay? However, California seems to have this problem every single year. New wildfires, new forest fires, right? And they never seem to fix the problem, okay? But of course, he says he talked to fire chiefs. All right, fire chiefs told him what the problems were. Well, just to remind you about what the problems were, the reservoirs were not full of water. The fire hydrants had no water pressure, okay? They were short on firefighters, and the firefighters they were trying to hire were all based on DEI hiring practices. And of course, the fire chief, who was later fired by even Karen Bass, couldn't handle her, right? She was a lesbian woman, as were all of her co-chiefs, right? What are the odds of that happening? So there's a huge failure across the system to not be prepared to handle these outbreaks. And as was also mentioned by Representative Hageman, right, California has not been clearing its forests, right? They've not been taking out the dead brush and the dead trees. They haven't been taking care of it, which of course is why we tend to have these outbreaks and these wildfires every single year. Now, would that have helped in LA? Not necessarily, but having access to water and firemen would have, okay? But of course, Representative Lieu isn't going to mention any of that. Instead, he's just going to throw up his hands and say, oh, there's absolutely nothing we could have done, which of course is what the left always says. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and say hi to your mom for me. Do you like t-shirts? Of course you do. And now you can support the channel by buying an Angry Teacher t-shirt designed by me, Angry Teacher. So if you like America, if you like freedom, if you like liberty, then go ahead and click the link in the description, where all designs, of course, are 100% mother approved. So enjoy yourself and find something you like today.